Welcome along to Live on Air. Today we have with us Emma Hensman, who's from Greenlane Christian Centre, and I'd like you to tell us a little bit about yourself, please, Emma.
Hi there. I'm a youth pastor, so I work with high school age youth in our ministry between the ages of 13 and 18 years old. I've been doing this for 2 years, and before that, I was a volunteer leader for about 6 years. Before that, I was a youth myself, so I actually came along to this youth group because one of my friends invited me. So it's cool having seen the youth ministry from all aspects and all facets. I studied law and arts with a conjoint degree of honours at Auckland University, and I was always really involved in camps and youth ministries, but never really thought that it would be a career or a vocation. I was going to be a lawyer, and then God quite clearly called me away from that, and really clearly made me see that this was my home and this is what I wanted to do.
That's fantastic. When you were doing your conjoint law and arts, what did you study in the arts?
German and Māori. So I was really interested in languages, and particularly Māori and law, where they crossed over, looking at that unique range of legal issues.
Does that help by way of background with your work as a youth pastor? Do you find that you ever have young people who come to you and ask for, a little bit of advice or counsel about legal issues?
Yeah, sometimes I'm not usually much help because, of course, I'm not a practicing lawyer, and usually the things they're asking me are a bit out of left field. But it definitely helps with communication side of things. And a lot of people were very surprised when I went from law to ministry. They thought they were very different paths, but there was a lot of parallel in terms of communication, pursuit of truth and justice, the ability to kind of read ranging texts and condense them for someone to read and understand from a different perspective. So there are lots of different transferable skills there.
Wow, I think that's incredible, actually. The idea of justice that you got from training in legal profession, and then transferring it over into the theological component of justice, which is, I guess it's a little bit different.
Huge. Yeah, definitely.
What age are you primarily working with in Greenlane Christian Centre?
So the high school ministry, so 13 years old to 18 years old. And then my leaders are between 18 and about 26. So I'm working alongside them, volunteer leaders, and then also alongside parents and families. So the nature of family ministries and youth ministries is that everything connects a lot. So you have a range of people and no day looks the same.
No day looks the same. That makes life quite exciting, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit more about with that age range. Does it get harder as they get older and move through high school from year 9 through to 13? Does it sort of look different?
Yeah, hugely. So one of the things you see is that when kids are in primary school or intermediate school, they're very much connected to their family. So if their family comes to church, they come to church. So they often don't really question it. They may have big questions, but their questions aren't as deep or don't require the same level of depth to the answers. And they're a lot easier to connect with. So younger kids, as you all know, they open up a lot faster. They run up to you, they'll hug you, they'll be honest, they'll just tell you what they think. We see as kids get older, as they start to individuate, they often will push away their family. They'll have to find out things for themselves. They often won't want to come to church because they'll perceive it as being lame or uncool. And they also require a lot more work in relationship because they want to feel individually known and loved, and they want to have their questions answered. And they're starting to really have big questions as they face loss for the first time, or are experiencing bullying, or a whole range of tough situations that come with high school. So it definitely gets harder. It's also hard because the older you get, the busier you get, and you start to have kids who are very preoccupied with exams and schoolwork and extracurricular activities and sports. So you've got to somehow fit in the midst of that juggle and teach them how to prioritise their faith.
So it must be a difficult balancing act for you to know how far you can push an activity or a camp or a particular event, and when to sort of pull back from it. That sounds like a lot of discernment is required.
Definitely. You've got to really be receptive to where your youth are at, because you can't just lead from the top down. You can't just tell them this is what's happening, boom, 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 it's going to happen. There needs to be ownership and buy-in, because when it comes down to it, the youth group is their youth group. It's their community. It's what they want it to be. And so it's about enabling them to take those leadership roles and take steps in a direction and really, ideally, be self-sufficient. I think any leader is wanting to do themselves out of a job. So to see the young adults and the adolescents become leading their own peers, that's the dream. And so you've got to really kind of just discern, one kid might be one place, another kid might be a completely different place. And so you've got to treat them differently and push them differently.
So you must be very involved with the use of social media, Facebook and all the variants kind of. But what about with families? Is there a sort of distinction you have to make in order to organise and structure all of these activities?
Yeah. We use a lot of Facebook. So our youth group, we have a Facebook group, and that's an online community for them to find out what's happening, to share links, to ask questions. It's really useful and really practical to get out information, but also to get feedback. So if we want to have a panel, or we need questions of, what do you want teaching on, or what sort of events do you want to do, it's very easy to connect with the masses that way. With parents, we use emails more. Some are on Facebook, but most aren't. But the other thing is that as the kids get older, the parents are less involved, so they don't need to get every sort of detail of everything. They kind of trust that their 16-year-old can make those decisions, and they're just kept in the general loop, which is quite nice. Whereas if you look at the younger ministries, you're going to parents, and then the parents are talking to their kids. So we're kind of talking to both.
Right. Do you have to be involved with other forms of social media as well?
We don't have to. We have Instagram as well. Instagram is just so commonly used that it makes sense. A lot of kids might not be on Facebook so much, but they are on Instagram. For us, that's kind of enough. Otherwise, you start having kind of 5 things to keep up with. So just Facebook and Instagram is enough for now for me.
Yeah, I was looking at doing some background research into Greenlane Christian Centre, and they have an excellent ministry with their videos, videoing the sermons and putting them on to, the main church website. This is something that I haven't really thought about before, but do you have many of your youth group involved in making and crafting videos for themselves?
Yeah, actually, it's a really good question. So something that we've definitely seen is how technologically capable youth are, and so it's such a blessing because we don't need to be getting professionals to do a lot of things because our youth have the ability. So we have several boys and girls who are about 16, 17 years old who make incredible videos. In fact, we as a youth group have videos for all our camps that are made by the kids, and they are professional level. So one of those boys is being paid kind of full-time to do videography work by different companies, and it's going to be his career. So it's a cool opportunity not only to benefit as a youth group, but also to provide a space for kids to develop those skills, and they get their hands on, and they get opportunities they usually wouldn't have because we have like the equipment we can lend them. It's the same with music. Like we have kids who are musical, and in a church context, there's such a path for them to grow because they can connect with older musicians, they can access recording instruments, and so you see just the investment is so huge, and then we see such a return from it. We have so many of our current music leaders and worship leaders, they were youth who were encouraged when they were young.
I mean, I think that's one of the really great things about a vibrant congregation is that people are learning skills that may go on in other areas of their, as they grow through teenage to young adult, etc. Things like music, things involved in media, and so on. And it's never really acknowledged so much by the church, is it? That in some ways the church is teaching a kind of Christian work ethic, if I can put it in those. I'm sure the young people wouldn't like to hear it described that way, but it is. It's teaching a whole lot of habits that make for, an easier path through life.
And that's the thing with youth that's different from pastoring adults, for example. We're not only teaching them who God is, but we're teaching them things like how to drive and how to apply for jobs or how to sit exams. There's so much that's new in their life experience that they're experiencing in our community for the first time. And so they have leaders who will be stepping in and helping them. And I'm often giving them advice, and I'm their reference when they're applying for their first job. And it's cool that that's the holistic approach to community. It's not God separate from life. It's God in life and God and life. And so, in the same way God cares about us reading our Bibles, he also cares about how we learn how to study and how we look after our bodies and how we manage stress and all these really practical and psychological skills. And so it's kind of one of my passions is to bring that into the youth group and into the curriculum, because that's, I think, where the gospel's most needed.
I think that's a fantastic answer. That's hugely encouraging. The fact that not only you're doing it, but the fact that the whole of that church community supports this, because this is the reality of what Christianity in action is all about. So that's a tremendously encouraging message. You use the word counsel. Now, I mean, you would give wise counsel, I guess, along the way, but you'd also have specialist areas you would refer on, when someone had deeper kind of issues or problems.
Definitely. Yeah, so we have a team of counsellors that we refer to if we need to. So some of them are part of our church community and they're practicing psychiatrists or psychologists or counsellors. And then there's others who, they're not necessarily part of our church community, but we've worked closely with them for a long time. And then we also have awareness and access to sort of Auckland DHB services, so that we just know what the paths are and at what point we refer on, because yes, we're not registered psychologists ourselves, so we just walk alongside them as they take their journey.
But of course, it's really part of the function of the body of Christ to be looking out for and looking after the various members. So again, that's a tremendous vocation and the enterprise, Christian enterprise that you're involved with.
Yeah, definitely.
Emma, I'm going to ask two questions. I'm going to ask about the pitfalls of being a youth minister and the joys of being a youth minister. I'd like to start with the problem areas. What are the pitfalls of being a youth minister?
Well, I think they're similar to the pitfalls of working in any ministry, in that you're working with people and people can be quite difficult. The nature of youth is that everything is on steroids, so the highs are higher, the lows are lower. We see a lot of change, so you have kids who are growing tremendously, but then kids who, they'll be on the right track or they'll seem like they're fine, and then they'll really quickly nosedive or go off in a very different direction, and that can be really discouraging, especially when you've seen them have so much potential and promise. And so there definitely is a point you really have to trust God with their futures and their decision making. There's also a real struggle these days to not have youth ministry be seen as a resource or a product to consume. I think there can be that challenge where it's just another thing competing for kids' time, and it's about having the best lights or the best technology or the most fun, and it's easy for it to become wrapped up in that sort of shallow approach, whereas actually it has to be deeper, and we're not going to be able to compete with the world in terms of entertainment. And so trying to make sure the kids understand what the heart of church is, and that actually it and a relationship with God should be a priority, and it doesn't come sort of second or third or fourth after their grades or their sports or other achievements. We see just such a busy generation who just don't have time and won't, because of that, they're so oversaturated, they're almost incapable of committing, so they won't commit to anything, which is really hard, because actually you have to commit to faith into that journey, and you have to take ownership of it yourself. So yeah, those are some of the pitfalls, as well as just, all the normal things when you see a kid hurting, when you see a kid who's being bullied or who is going through depression, and they're just seeming so lost. That can be a real sad part of the job, but it's also a really beautiful part to be able to be let into that, and to be able to shine God's light into that, even if it takes a really long time to see any fruit.
Well, I guess that leads to that kind of the joys of ministry, and in particular youth ministry. You must have had some real highs working with such a diverse range of young people.
Yeah, definitely. Having the access to their lives, so having them just be themselves and to let you in and to tell you about what's going on is such a joy. So having kids come up to me and be like, I was reading my Bible and this verse jumped out at me and I was praying and God answered my prayer, or having many kids come up and ask me to baptize them, that is such a joy, and it's something I'll never get sick of. And seeing them become who God made them to be. So because I've been in this church for almost a decade now, I know some of these kids and I've seen them grow up from being sort of 10-year-olds, and to see them become these really strong godly leaders who are excelling in everything they put their hearts towards, and who are doing it for the Lord, and who are loving their neighbours. That is such a joy to see the active fruit of faith. As well as that, there's also, the silly fun that comes from being on a camp or being in a car and doing sing-alongs or pranking people and throwing water bombs at people. There's a lot of lighthearted joy that comes in the ministry as well.
I guess it's just in the nature of wanting to have fun.
Exactly.
The last area that I'd just like to get some brief comments on, please, Emma, is we're an elderly congregation. We do have a smattering of young people through the grandchildren of grandparents in the congregation. We've also got a couple of younger guys in the 25, 26 age group.
Yeah.
And what opportunities would you say might exist for us to contemplate putting in a part-time youth pastor? Should we be... let me be very specific. Should we be aiming to try and replicate all that large-scale ministry that's going on in Greenlane Christian Centre, or should we be really focusing on what we've got? What do you feel?
Always start with what you've got and start with where you're at, because every cultural climate is so different. So I'm very blessed to know a lot of other youth pastors in my area and to meet with them on a monthly, and everyone does things very differently because they have different kids and they have different resources, and so there's no point ever trying to do what another church is doing, and kids can be quite resistant to that. They just sometimes they're on a track and that's where they're at. So I would say start with the one-on-one. So all ministry and faith comes from personal relationship, but particularly with youth ministry, it's sorry about that. It's about empowering the young people you have and having a relationship with them that will just grow, and then they will invite their friends and other people will want that, because no matter where a kid is at with their faith, they want people who care about them and who will be constant in their life and who will be encouraging them and who they can turn to. There's a statistic which social scientists sort of released which said that to navigate adolescence successfully, a young person needs 6 adult role models or mentors, and many people have their parents, so that's 2 and no one else, and some people don't even have 2 parents. And so to be some of that community, to be that village, is what's really important. So I'd say, even with just sort of 5-10 hours a week to start off with, a youth pastor or a part-time youth worker could just be investing in the young people that you already have, and then connecting them into the wider community and seeing what they're interested in, just having fun with them, and then seeing where it grows.
Well, one of the things that has sort of been on my conscience about this is that I wouldn't like any church, and I certainly wouldn't like ours, to develop a youth ministry in the belief that somehow youth were the salvation to enable our church to carry on and grow. But to me, that's an utterly false start. Listening to you, I see all the drive is around trying to give youth the positive message and encouragement that a life in Christ and a life together in the body of Christ can produce extraordinary results. And it's not about that it has to be in this place with this congregation.
Yeah,
Is that?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess with any investment and pastoral care of people, there is a degree to which you're not looking for a return on investment, but particularly with youth, it shouldn't be with that heart of we're doing this so that our church will X, Y, Z, but you do it knowing that your church will reap some benefits and will reap very great benefits. Some of those young people might be empowered to go lead elsewhere. So I had several of my young people years ago, they came up to me and they were really apologetic. They're like, Emma, we're not going to come to Greenlane Christian Centre anymore. And I was like, oh, why is that? And they're like, well, we feel called to start a youth group in our community, which was Glendowie, so about 20 minutes away, and that's where they lived. And I was saying, well, that's the heart of Christ. Let's do it. We don't need you here. We love you. You're part of our family, but that church doesn't have a youth ministry, and if that's what God's put in your heart, that is the coolest thing. And so I still have that relationship with those girls, but they aren't in our congregation as such. But then at the same time, some of our current leaders, actually most of our current leaders, were young people who were fed in our youth ministry at some point. So having a vibrant youth ministry or having a growing youth ministry will just trickle up the effects. And it also empowers a lot of older people, because it's good for what's good for part of the body is good for the whole, and it's good for older people to see younger people and to be encouraged by them or to catch their enthusiasm, and then also enables a lot of them to kind of be more active maybe in their faith in their church, because all of a sudden they're mentoring young people and they're having to answer those questions. So it shakes everything up a bit, and it's good for everything, but there's definitely no guarantees, but that's not why we do it.
I think that's a wonderful answer, and I like the idea that we should get all shook up about some things sometimes, and young people can do that at the drop of the hat.
Yes.
Emma, we're just at the end of the interview time, so is there any one really important thing you'd like to say, both to your own community at Greenlane or to our community or to any of the YouTube audience?
I'd say listen to God's Spirit, because He has plans and provisions for every different part of His body, and so He'll work differently in one church than He will in another church, and often it's unconventional or it's not the same as the neighbouring church, but that doesn't mean it's wrong. And the most exciting thing is to be where God wants you to be and to be listening to His voice. So I just encourage you guys to do that, and that's what we're doing in our church, and that's what we should all be doing in our individual walks with God as well. And it's so exciting to see God moving through that and to encourage the younger generation to learn how to listen to God's voice as well.
Well, I think that's a wonderful answer to end on, and just like to say to our YouTube viewers, please remember to like, share, and particularly subscribe to the channel. And we hope to have Emma back on in 6 months' time, and we'll talk about progress that we've been making over here at Trinity-at-Waiake. Thank you very much indeed, Emma.
Awesome.